Last Thursday night saw a packed house at GOP headquarters for a town hall where two opposing slates vying for the county leadership made their case to the people. At issue were divisiveness within the party, the record of the party, and what the path forward is, and I believe the voters were given a clear choice. Get ready for episode 6, but first, we have an after-action report.
And the power of prayer is far beyond what we actually know.
Last Saturday, dozens of pro-life activists braved the cold weather to March for Life, an event organized by Lifeline of Wilmington and Wilmington NC for Life. The energy was amazing, the speakers were fantastic, but the climax of the event, the emotional touchstone of it, came at the very end, when a young woman whose mother had chosen to keep her at the age of 15 when everyone around her was telling her to get an abortion, wrote a letter to her mother that ultimately she was too overwhelmed with emotion to read herself, thanking her for her life.
But you said no. I love whoever this little baby is, and I always will. You were the person who kept me going and are my rock, and I know I don't always show it, but you are the person that I know I will always have the best interest for me. I know that you will never let me down, and thank you for choosing life. I love you. I love you.
And now, just before we start, your action items for the week. Your number one action item is still to register for the county convention as soon as possible and invite as many registered Republicans as you can to do the same. We have to win this one. Go to the school board meeting Tuesday, March 7th to see our 4 conservative school board members in action. They need your support. Go to the We the People Town Hall Saturday, March 11th to meet the America First Grassroots Slate. If you haven't met them already, this is your chance. During this episode, you're going to hear from the Slates. Afterward, reach out to them. Hear from them what their positions are and what they intend to do, and ask them to clarify if you have questions. It's your right as a voter. And now, episode 6.
Why are we here tonight? Why do we have 2 slates running this year? And the answer to that is going to be there's division in our party. You know, I want y'all to look at the cameras up in the corner for a second. And I want you to recognize there are no cameras on the outside of this building. We are running surveillance on what happens inside and not imposters that could be harming our building or entering into an unwelcome. That's a problem.
Amen.
That's how it started out. It was a very intense evening. As I said at the beginning of the broadcast, it was a very useful town hall because there was a clear choice. Clearly, I have a favored slate, but what I mean by that is that there were 2 distinct sets of positions available to the voters who are going to be choosing on March 21st. What's also interesting about it is that both slates, indeed both sides of the room, seem to be agreed on the fundamental problem of divisiveness, but they had totally different ideas about how to deal with it, and they even seem to have totally different ideas about the state of the party and what was going on with the party. In fact, as we'll see in our first set of clips, they even disagreed about the simple question of, are we, the Republican Party, winning?
We should be winning hand over fist. Where was the red wave? We failed. We're losing. And that's a problem. 2020 was the first time since 1976, when Jimmy Carter ran for president, that this county didn't vote a Republican president in.
One of the things I have to correct, we had the most phenomenal results in the midterm election. Right there, John hit it. That's the man. He told us we needed to create the red wave. Can we thank John for all of his hard work? I don't know.
So you see the contrast. Diane Zaricki is saying, we're losing, we failed. Stephanie Fortunato is saying, hey, can we acknowledge the extraordinary victory we had? And obviously, we did have some important victories, but I think it's very difficult to characterize what we did with the historic opportunity we had in 2022 as a stunning win. That is my view of it. And the way Stephanie Fortunato decided to exemplify this claim was very strange to many people, because she pointed out John Hinnant, who not only lost his race, but it was felt that he didn't get as much support as he should have from within the establishment of the party. And what's more, the significance of his loss was tremendous, because with his loss, we ended up one shy of a veto-proof supermajority in the state legislature. How that isn't a colossal fail, I don't know. The other thing that's a little odd here is that if the claim is that we're winning, that really complicates the subsequent claim that we desperately need to fix the party. Nevertheless, that's the claim that both slates made. And I'll let you take a look now. We'll start with what Diane and Stephanie each seem to think is the biggest obstacle facing the party right now.
We have to mend the divisiveness. The time is now.
My vision has always been, if you've sat in any of the executive committee meetings, you usually get treated to it, because this is where I feel very passionately about it. To create 43 strong, healthy precincts that can counter any dark money thrown at us in upcoming elections. Now, I have to say, we've had this experience this past election cycle of millions of dark money to go at us.
Okay, so Diane says the biggest challenge facing us is divisiveness within the party. Stephanie says millions of dollars in dark money. Okay? So presumably we'll find out from each of them what it is we're meant to do about this.
Leaders win by evolving and adopting. You have to adapt to change, and change is a constant every day in the world. You don't do the same thing and continue winning. You have to continue changing to continue winning. And we have to change now.
My hope would be to create a system that would give election success, but would act as a template for all 100 counties in North Carolina. We will set the standards. We will show them by our hard work and our ideas, because you guys have great ideas.
I know that the strength of our conservative principles isn't enough to build the vibrant Republican Party that we need right now. It's not enough. We need to actively engage our grassroots organizations. We need to bring them in, assess their talents, connect them to the right area, and encourage them to actively commit. And that's how this county builds back stronger. We, the people of New Hanover County, can harness the power of our grassroots movement to build a stronger and more vibrant Republican Party. And I can assure you, no volunteer will be turned away. You will get return phone calls, and if you want to be activated, we will activate you.
I hope to continue to build on what we already have in a community that empowers positive, constructive contribution by any local patriot to help bring about a freer New Hanover County, and thereby a freer North Carolina and USA.
Absolutely.
I believe that because of my experience with all of you and the great working relationships we've already created, that we've established together, we will be able to hit the ground running without any downtime needed to reinvent the wheel. Amen?
So that was very much the flavor of the debate, if you will. It wasn't a proper debate, but both sides were making their case. that one side was getting very specific about what the problems were and how to deal with them, and the other side was dealing basically in slogans with some grand ideas and some I'm sure sincere patriotism. We're gonna make a template for Republican victory for the state and for the nation because you guys have great ideas, but I can't pull one of those ideas right now. I'm not trying to make fun of Stephanie, but for an observer who wasn't part of this county, I think they'd see one person who has a plan and one person who doesn't. The other big thing that comes out here, and I've said it already, is that the proven slate really gets hung up on their record because, what does she say? We don't need to reinvent the wheel. But then she also says we need to make sure that the precinct chairs are filled. Well, you guys didn't fill them. They've not been filled. And often when they were filled, they weren't filled according to the plan of organization. And that brings me to another issue that's going to come up. I called this episode Much Was Left Unsaid, because another thing that happened, one of the dynamics that was going on is that the America First Grassroots slate was extremely diplomatic and said a lot of stuff obliquely, which I think was smart there. I'll try and tease some of it out tonight because I'm not as smart as they are. The proven slate, for their part, also made some very strong claims without substantiating them. One last thing before we move on. Stephanie Fortunato said that we would welcome any positive contribution from any patriot in the county who wants to help. I have to say, this was not my experience with Stephanie Fortunato. Many of you may have seen me running around the polls during early voting and on the final day of voting. And Peter LaFond and I noticed that all of the polling stations were very well staffed. And we thought, well, maybe we should work on getting people to the polls. So we wanted to go to Dave Olander with a plan to offer rides to people who couldn't get to the polls, the old and the infirm, etc. So he was at the senior center. I went there to find him. I met Stephanie Fortunato at the booth. She said he's inside. I asked for his phone number, and Stephanie, you refused. Big deal. I had to go inside to find Dave. I got in trouble with the judge. That's because I'm a dummy and I didn't communicate properly. That wasn't your fault. But the fact is, we were in the middle of the election, and I was trying to help get voters to the polls, and you made me jump through hoops because, in your opinion, I'm not the sort of person one would give Dave Olander's number to. Dave Olander, who's the sweet soul of service, who would give his card to anyone who's volunteering for the GOP. It's just not how a teammate behaves. So your protestations fell on deaf ears here because what you said was the Republican Party becoming fun again and everyone knowing you and having had a good experience with you. That was not my experience. And I'll tell you what I think. This has to do with a cultural divide in the party. And I'm sad to say that I think many people in the establishment wing of the party think of people in the grassroots wing of the party the same way Democrats do, as deplorables. And that when it comes to game time, that little "they're not like us" feeling takes over and keeps you from doing something fundamental to winning elections. That's a liability that anyone voting on the 21st needs to be aware of. And that's all I have to say about that.
We're not winning. Okay, we're not winning enough. In some cases, Democrats are running unopposed. I believe that the two slates have two different visions. One vision is what we're currently doing. It's a top-down command and control organization. And there's good intentions there. The problem is it has not proven itself to be successful, not successful enough to get us to the next level. Our vision is to grow the precincts. We want to get all those chairs filled, and not just filled, but active. We got to grow the grassroots. Diane was talking about the grassroots and the volunteers. That's the engine that gets our candidates elected, and the right candidates elected. Mm-hmm. You know, our vision is abiding by the bylaws that are there. They're there for a reason. There's bylaws and rules. We need to follow those. So here's our plan. We got 4 things we're going to do. First, we got to purify the foundation. It's about transparency and trust. When I say transparency, a couple of versions of that. Fiscal transparency. Did you know that the bylaws require a fiscal committee and an audit committee? That needs to be in place. We need to be running things very transparency so it's beyond reproach. Yeah. But more importantly, when I say transparency, it's organizational transparency. We are going to fill those committees, but everyone's going to know who's on the committees. The people that need to be invited are going to be invited to those committees. And then ultimately, we don't need the same handful of people on 8 or 9 committees. We don't need an echo chamber. We need to have these ideas. We're going to unify the party. We're going to grow the party. I'm so excited about this. 4th thing we're going to do is we're going to get candidates. We're going to get the right candidates for office. We will change this county. We will change the state. We're going to change this country. Our commitment. When elected to the office of chairman of the new Hanover County Republican Party, I pledge that I will diligently work to 1, consciously abide by the sound principles fostered by the Republican Party, the North Carolina Republican Party State Plan of Organization, and the new Hanover County Republican Party Plan of Organization, to include ceasing to delegate authority to positions that do not exist in the plans of organization. Provide fiscal transparency through the organization with the formation of a finance committee and an audit committee, as called for in the plans of organization. Establishing all committees, specifically those not yet formed, as outlined and prescribed by the Republican Party plans of organization. We're going to establish open meeting rules, starting with the executive board committee meetings, allowing all officers of a precinct and their invited guests to attend as non-voting observers. Third, we're going to establish a sergeant at arms position, tasked with the responsibility of maintaining orderly conduct at meetings. Fourth, we're going to ensure that every ballot in an election has a Republican candidate where applicable, and that no Democrat runs unopposed. Lastly, we're going to recruit candidates from the Republican Party pool of leaders only, not the unaffiliated or Democratic Party pool of leaders. I, the undersigned, on behalf of the Slate, do solemnly swear.
Turn right.
John.
Then turn right.
So I let Jonathan get through his piece without interrupting because I thought he was very cogent and very to the point, and it was a great speech, easy to edit because of its cogency. And I think you can see now why I said much was left unsaid. Jonathan's speech, and particularly the commitment, not the pledge, the commitment at the end, were a point-by-point rebuke of exactly what the GOP did and has been doing during the last few elections, which unfortunately for the other slate is the mantle that they're trying to take on. They're calling themselves the proven slate. But if you look at Jonathan's speech, what have they proven? They have proven that they don't choose the right candidates. That is to say, They like to elect Democrats, and they like to elect rhinos. Fiscal transparency. What's up with the money missing from the building fund? Whoopsie. Organizational transparency. All this stuff that Jonathan says they're not going to do, this is exactly what has been going on in the GOP. People don't know who's on the committees. Many people are fulfilling multiple roles. He didn't get into the conflict of interest between people who are connected to tide turners and also have a role within the organization. He didn't get into people who were working for campaigns also being part of the GOP organization. These are all issues that need to be fixed. Unity within the party. There's no unity in the party, and this, I thought Jonathan was brilliant in the way that he didn't make this an accusation, but in fact, he was laying the blame for that with the party. And that's leadership, okay? Taking responsibility. If the chair of the party, if his job isn't to resolve conflict within the party, I don't know what is. I thought it was extraordinarily deft, the way he brought up the abysmal record of the current GOP leadership. And it really put the ball in Nevin Carr's court to respond, because after that speech, the subject had become the record of the GOP. So let's see how Nevin responds.
All right, so first I'm going to start out by recognizing everybody that had a hand this election cycle in the tremendous victory that we had in Hannah. Into a lot of time here, but I do want to particularly point out the school board again, just because we all work so hard.
Okay, I don't want to be unfair to Nevin, but I do want you to remember what he said. Hold on to that. His proof of the most important win we had, part of our tremendous victory in 2022, was getting all 4 GOP members elected to the school board. I agree. But he's going to say something later that is totally inconsistent with that. That's all I'll say for now.
I know that the topic in the air tonight, we're talking about divisiveness and party unity and trying to come together. I was speaking with someone earlier this week, and I think it's a relevant thing to point out. It's a little excerpt from Federalist Paper 10 from James Madison, and he gives us a perspective about human nature. All right, and it's important that you understand human nature. He says, "So strong is this propensity of mankind to fall into mutual animosities, that where no substantial occasion presents itself, the most frivolous and fanciful distinctions have been sufficient to kindle their unfriendly passions and excite their most violent conflicts." So you get a bunch of people in a room together, and they're going to figure out a way to fight about something. I mean, that's the difference between conservatives and Democrats, right?
Yes.
I mean, Democrats, they just fall right in line.
That's right.
They never dissent from each other. But you get a bunch of independent-minded people in the same room together, and everyone's got ideas on how to make things better, and you're going to end up with some division. It's a healthy part of the process. What we're doing right now is to have everybody out here putting out what their ideas are, and let's let the party decide which direction to go. There's 5 things that our slate is going to really put our focus into. And I know we always say we need to get Republicans elected, right? I mean, that's a given. That's our purpose. We need to get Republicans elected. But we also need to focus on any policy-making position within the county. Whether it's a hire, whether it's an appointment. When you look at the HHS board, which I learned the other day, the county mask mandate wasn't even passed by the county commissioners. It was the HHS board.
Get rid of it.
Well, and how many conservatives were stepping up trying to get in there? I mean, I didn't even know about it.
NHCCC.
Yeah, we were there.
They also supported some Democrat school board members.
Okay, also, well, no, I'm sorry. Well, full disclosure here. So I am a grassroots conservative person at heart. I've been a member of numerous grassroots conservative organizations, and I like to stick with the ones that focus on getting Republicans, conservatives elected. And so anyhow.
I'm trying to be respectful, but this is why I stopped the video. And I do apologize for laughing so loudly at you, but it was frankly a ridiculous statement. This is why I stopped the video earlier. He touted as one of the GOP's big victories that all 4 school board candidates got elected. Here he turns around and says that the NHCCC supported a Democrat for school board. Well, the NHCCC only endorsed one school board candidate because she was the most conservative candidate. That was Melissa Mason, whose name may come up again. That's one thing. The other thing that comes out in this clip, and I think it gives us an insight into why the divisiveness is not only so intractable in this county, but also so confusing to many people. That was palpable in the room. People were like, why can't we get together? Why do we keep running into this? Why is there all this backbiting online and all that stuff? And listen, this is commentary, and I may be rough on people, but I don't think I'm taking any unfair shots. People have to answer for what they say, and doing that includes me. If I'm full of it, let me know. Make the case, and I'll consider it, okay? But I think Nevin is exactly what he says. I think he is, in his heart, a grassroots conservative. But here he is demonstrating that he's completely ignorant of some of the most important activities of the most significant grassroots organization in the county, NHCCC. They were fighting HHS tooth and nail during the lockdowns, and 2 of them got taken to jail for it. Okay? I promise you, Nevin, they're the leaders in this space, okay? They were the leaders investigating Julia Bozeman. They were the leader. They worked with the whistleblower to find out about the COVID jab scare tactics at Novant. And what he says at the end is that he's grassroots, but he prefers to work with organizations that support Republican candidates. I think it pretty clearly was an oblique dig at NHCCC. So what that says to me is that he has an idea of what NHCCC is about, but it's not based in any knowledge of that organization or the people who make it up or what they've done. So the question is, how does someone who's running for county chair not know about that political element in his county? But I think if you think through how he's been in the party this long and isn't aware of this stuff and can say something as absurd as the NHCCC supported a Democratic candidate for the school board, by which I presume he meant Melissa Mason, and that he's just learning that the HHS was responsible for the mask mandates. you know, I pass myself off as some sort of commentator here. I don't know everything. It's not required to know everything. But I think if you're going to be a leader, you need to be a little more informed of the basics. But the question is he the only person who has these gaps in his knowledge or who has these misapprehensions about different candidates, different grassroots organizations, different volunteers or campaign workers within the Republican Party? And I think the easy answer is that, unfortunately, a lot of people's impressions of what is happening in the party is garnered from gossip. And I'm not going to get into all the gossip that I've heard about myself because it's not worth repeating. But it's shocking to me that he hasn't done the most basic research on these things that he's talking about in his campaign speech. Because he's going to make some more statements about how to control the people who are disrupting the party. And I think anyone who watches this has to wonder whether he knows what he's talking about when he talks about those people. Notice that he says he's been a member of a lot of organizations. He doesn't name any of them. I believe him. But it's something consistent in his presentation, that he makes strong claims but doesn't back them up when he easily could. And then he also makes strong claims that are patently false. Let's move on.
The next focus we have is election integrity. Next is operational effectiveness. All right, we need to have a good organizational chart with well-defined roles. We need to attract as much talent as we can into the organization. We also want more party participation. As you heard John mention earlier, 53,000 registered Republicans in the county, and we are still struggling to try to find precinct chairs to fill every precinct. And then finally, continuous support for the candidates. This isn't just about getting candidates elected, but it's about being a resource for candidates after they get elected.
Yes.
All kinds of things with how they want to plan their priorities. If we can help them with research, if we can do calls to action. As you get to the national and state levels in politics, you have staffers that do this stuff for you. Well, we need to be that staff for our local elected officials.
Amen.
Sending emails, calls for action, sending thank yous to the public officials when they make a good vote. Does it sound familiar? Sounds like some stuff that I do here. Sounds like stuff that the NHCCC does. Sounds like stuff that Gail Major does and the RLC does. The grassroots organizations. It's really interesting that Nevin seems to be making Diane and John's point here, but I don't think he knows he's making it. These things are all being done by patriotic GOP conservatives in the county, and the party has not integrated these efforts. So it's interesting to see him miss that. And he again runs into the twin problems that Stephanie Fortunato had, which is not having any specific recommendations. We need to have a solid organization with a solid plan of organization that is well organized. There's no plan there. And then the other thing is the record. They keep running into their own record. And again, it's the precincts. We need to fill the precincts chairs. That's fine, but it's going to make it very difficult to sell it later when you say we keep doing the same thing we're doing. Now, just before I go on, I'm going to interrupt Nevin a few more times. It's not because I'm being unfair to him. It's because I think there's more to say about what he's saying. Part of it may be my bias. That's fine. Another commentator might chop it up a different way. I'm doing my best. I hope you appreciate it. But what I will say is there's a little functional difference between what the two guys did. Jonathan wrote a speech, Nevin worked from notes, and I think it shows in their presentation. So it's a lot easier to edit Jonathan and lay all his points out in order because that's what he did with fewer divagations as Nevin did. But part of it, again, is lack of specificity. And I'm going to compare the two candidates now since I'm breaking the tape up anyway. Check this out.
I believe that as well. And I know that our local Republican Party, that we should all adopt that as our statement of beliefs and to provide the trust to invite people into the party and participate.
And going back to the idea of trust and transparency, the thing is you have to run it this way because trust is not something that I can just ask you for. I can say, yeah, just trust me. No, it's the actions that get trust. It's the transparency.
So one guy quotes a political philosopher he likes and says, if we all embrace that and put it on our website, people will trust us. The other guy tells you exactly the action he's going to take to gain your trust. This is the kind of clear choice that was presented on Thursday night, and I think it's so important that people take note of the difference in seriousness and connection between the two candidates for chair and the two slates in general.
Collectively, we have raised over $125,000 through fundraising events. Over $85,000 in donations. Worked over 68 days at the polls, sent out over 75,000 text messages, distributed over 10,000 door hangers, and put in over 1,200 volunteer hours. If you all haven't seen at least one of us out in the last couple of years,
I think it's great that they raised that money. But again, I think one slate has a different standard of victory and accomplishment than the other slate does. And I'm always very wary stylistically of people who are congratulating themselves constantly. Maybe it's just the way I am. Maybe it's just because I was a fan of Joe Gibbs and he would never smile until the Lombardi trophy was in the air. I remember he looked like he wanted to puke after 1987 NFC conference championship. It's like, you won, celebrate. He's like, no, we have not won yet. So it's just a difference in style. And I just want to put this boast in perspective. They're talking about raising $125,000 over the cycle, plus $85,000. I don't know if the two are mixed, if that's $125,000 total or $230,000 total, whatever. Veronica McLaurin Brown raised $120,000 in the primary. That's one school board candidate. And the GOP is boasting about $230K. Supposedly $100K of that went to the billboards for the school board members. So they're talking about $130K for everyone else. I don't really know. You know, I think they're disconnected. And I think the people who are supporting them are disconnected because they're not listening to other people. And I think, again, one of the reasons that happens is that people are getting into tribes on social media, and when they actually walk into the room together, they can't look at each other because they've built up such venom and animosity against each other. And, oh, maybe I've said something that was so outrageous I couldn't possibly look that person in the eye. So that's one of the reasons I think it's hard to solve the divisiveness in the party. And I don't think the slate that doesn't really get it is the way to go. I mean, they're boasting about $230,000 raised. It's just a different perspective.
No matter what happens during this election, this Republican chair election, it is absolutely imperative that we all shift focus to what the real mission is at hand after it's done. And we put everything under the bridge, and then we get to the real work, which is getting Republicans elected and beginning to take our country back. Thank you.
So I guess I'd feel differently about how Nevin closed if the rest of his presentation had been different. Here's the thing. You can't run on your record and also run away from your record. Okay? And neither he nor Stephanie took any responsibility for the divisiveness within the party. And when people don't take responsibility for their failures and then they start using phrases like, it's time to heal, it's time to move on, put it all behind us, mend fences, more often than not, it's a way of burying things that need to be dug up. So I'm going to take Nevin at his word. I agree. We need to heal the party and we need to put the divisiveness behind us after the election, which means that now, in the next few weeks, is the time to dig everything up. So next up is the question and answer session. The theme of the night supposedly was divisiveness, but the undercurrent of the night, the secondary theme, was exclusion, was shutting down debate, was keeping things and people quiet. And the form that the town hall took went right along with the lack of transparency that the GOP has had all along. People were only allowed to ask questions that could be answered by both sets of candidates, which meant by definition, no one was going to be able to question the proven slate on its record. But Will Connect knows how to put on a show, doesn't he? Let's check out the questions.
How do each of you plan to combat the people within this room and the Republican Party that constantly throw rocks at elected officials that are Republicans, that constantly throw rocks at us, the candidates, while they're running after the primary, between the primary and the general? How do you plan to combat that?
I hate to laugh at this, but the use of the word combat twice by Pat really makes me laugh here, because the note they just finished the debate on was, hey, after the election, we're just going to smooth everything out. But I guess Pat thinks it's important to combat the people who she designates as rock throwers. But presumably, given the way Nevin closed his speech, he'll, point out to her that no, he's going to mend fences. He's not going to have to combat rock throwers.
If I'm the Democrat Party, I would love to send people or people of people into the other camp and try to cause as much disruption as possible.
Nope. He actually doubles down on what Pat says. He goes her one better. He says that the Democrats have people of people that they've sent in to undermine the party. So it's funny, but it's also disturbing, because here's the thing. Let's be honest. When Pat says people in the room, if you're so concerned that there's a rock thrower in the party, why can't you name that person? Why can't you say what that person's done? Oh, you can say it, but you can't say it in a public forum. You can say it in gossip. You can allude to it in a public forum. But if you actually had to state out loud exactly what you mean by someone who's constantly throwing rocks at candidates after the primary and even after they've gotten into office, you'd be laughed out of that place. Here's the deal, Pat. You're an elected official. I'm your boss. So is every other voter in New Hanover County, whether they voted for you or not. But particularly the people who did vote for you, Pat, have the right, indeed the responsibility, to call you out when you do stuff you shouldn't do. Conversely, it would be nice if they thanked you and mentioned you and praised you when you did something good. Okay? So, hey, you got rid of transgender sports. Congratulations. I'm the guy who told people to write you a thank you letter. And Diane's the person who told me to do it. Okay? But you got to take the other side too. So when you violate the line between the separation of church and state, you make us all look bad. And we get to talk to you about that. And we get to talk publicly. Okay? As far as undercover Democrats go, again, Nevin, what are you talking about? Hey, we're all here in the room. There's undercover Democrats? Help us out, buddy. Tell us who they are. Tell us whose people of people they are. This kind of stuff is very nefarious. But I'll tell you what, if you guys want to get into a deal about talking about people who have attacked candidates after the primary, I'm going to show you how to do it. You bring the evidence and you present it publicly so everyone can see it, and you let them decide for themselves. Let's see what else Navin has to say.
So, it is very important to run a tight ship. There's not going to be any tolerance for the types of people within the party that continually trash the candidates both during the general election and after they're elected. If they're precinct chairs, then we're going to have to take a good hard look at what to do about that. And there are processes in place to help deal with that. But we need to be unified on the things that matter. And we're not going to give any platform, we're not going to give any time to people that come in and are just trying to divide us.
So I just heard it this time, listening to it again. There's a guy in front of me who responds to what Nevin says by going, KGB, which really says it all, right? Here they are, they're talking about these unnamed people, and they're saying there's procedures in place to get rid of them. Notice how long Nevin's claim that after the election, peace would be made and things would be put in the past. No. It's time to crack down, use those procedures. And I also want everyone to notice how much importance he puts on not attacking a candidate after the primary. That this is the worst thing anyone in the GOP can do. But I think Nevin must have missed the video that's going around where it's a tape of GOP Executive Director Wayne Gibson threatening Melissa Mason in the middle of the general, browbeating her, trying to get her to drop the Fire Faust item from her platform, and threatening to put out damaging articles about her campaign staff, me. Does that count, Nevin? This is what's so nefarious about this. Whether people believe what I say or not, whether they choose to tune in when I substantiate many of the things that I've been hinting at over the course of this podcast, I think everyone should recognize the pattern that people often cover their own malfeasance by blaming other people for exactly what they're doing. And the fact is, the GOP did try to undermine Melissa Mason's campaign. Now, maybe Nevin didn't know about that, but he knew enough to call her a Democrat earlier in the night. So either way, it doesn't seem like a great chair candidate to me. Because either he's swallowing this line uncritically, which does not make for a great leader, or he knows all the stuff and he's just lying to everybody. Sad. Let's hear what Jonathan has to say.
We talk to the people involved, we make them see things from that objective standpoint, and we lead them out of it. There's people who are just disruptors. We surround them. That's why I want to get more people here. We get our numbers swelling, so we surround it and drown it out.
Yeah.
It means we drown it out by getting more and more people doing it for a reason. And that's leadership. It's not trying to come through and fix everything. We're going to lead out of it and say, follow me. Let's get out of it for the greater good.
So again, a very clear choice. Someone who's talking about leadership, which is taking responsibility. If there's conflict in the party, it's because of something either we're doing or we're not doing. Right? As opposed to Nevin, who on the one hand says, well, it's just human nature. Here's a quote from James Madison, and thus abdicates all responsibility on the part of the party. But then when it comes up again, and it's about someone who's not inside the party structure, well, then that person is a hidden Democrat or a rock thrower and needs to be dealt with. It's a pretty clear choice.
Hey guys, my name is Logan Bradley. I wish Diane were still in the room because I was on the ground in Iraq fighting ISIS. So I can speak to the fact that it wasn't the generals. It was us calling, asking for help. Yeah. So, that being said, it was us asking for help to swell the ranks. It was us asking for help. I've heard both of you tonight say, we're gonna build it up. We're gonna add more people. We're gonna ask for volunteers. How? Haven't we been trying to do that for years? How?
What you described is bottom up, right? That's what the change was. It wasn't people that thought they're too disconnected. It was getting that information, having it up, organization, and acting on it. Now, to your point, how do we grow that? Again, I mentioned earlier, that's the part I love. I want to get out there because I know the people are out there. We have to reach out to them in all the various means that are out there. Whether it's a radio show, our existing media, podcasts, going to organizations and groups that have nothing to do with politics, and basically not taking no for an answer and say, look, I just want to talk to you. And we have the conversation. We say, look, I know there are conservatives in this room. I know you want to be involved. And then we get them through the doors. And that's the second half. When we get them through the doors, they have to stick. Because I think there's a lot of people that have come through the doors, but without that organization, without that trust and transparency, you can get jaded pretty quickly. And again, the intention hasn't been that, but we have to fix that foundation to make sure when people come through the doors, they stick. They feel like there's a family here. And then it's that word of mouth. Somebody comes like us, is involved. Yeah, I'm telling my neighbor about it.
There is a tremendous amount of inertia behind this slate. We have been growing the party.
That's right.
And I can look at a half dozen people in the room that I personally had to go and pull by the horse collar and get in here. But one way or another, we are growing the party, whatever it takes. It's not any single solution. It's putting in the work. 1,200 volunteer hours of door knocking, engaging with people, getting out in the community, trying to remind people that the Republican Party is the only vehicle that we're going to be able to use to stop what's going on with the Democrats.
Yeah.
And so our plan is to continue doing exactly what we've been doing for the last few years.
Exactly what we've been doing. Versus, this is how we fix having people not stick. It's the same distinction and the same clear choice over and over again. And it's astonishing how consistent it is.
My question actually follows Pat's concern. Obviously, our country's been overcome by communists. We're not going to put lipstick on a pig. Let's call it what it is. And as part of that reconciliation and amelioration of the party moving forward, we have to make sure that the candidates that we choose are authentic candidates. And so I hate to be the Peter Ducey in the room, but I am going to ask the following question. How long have each of you been a registered Republican?
Well, I don't have my entire Republican scorecard with me. I registered to be a Republican when I was 18 years old, and I continue to be a registered Republican up until after the 2012 election. And I had felt so frustrated with the way things were going after all the time that I had been putting in, that we weren't seeing any results. We were putting up some pretty loud, there was, the Republican Party I felt like was not working with my best interest at hand. So I focused more on grassroots conservative groups, spending time with the Tea Party and Convention of States. And eventually, after I came back in here when the school board had motivated me to get back off my chair and get re-engaged, I realized that the Republican Party is the only infrastructure, it's the only home for the conservative movement. There is no other way to beat the Democrats. We're not going to beat it by a splinter group or that splinter group. It's got to be through the Republican Party. So then I re-registered like a year or two ago.
That's pretty straightforward. Growing up in Utah, conservative state, it was a Republican state. I will say it's a tale of two states though, because being in Utah, I wasn't engaged. I think I woke up about 10 years ago, and then moving to North Carolina, I was fired up because this is where things are happening. In Utah, it's very easy just to kind of oh, we're conservatives, we know which way the vote's going. Here it's different. So, lifelong Republican.
I wouldn't love this question, but I think Chapman is very astute in asking it because it was earned. Because after all, one of the candidates claimed pretty clearly that there were undercover Democrats in the room. That was the premise of the question that he was responding to, that we were talking about people in the room. So he's kind of asking for it, right? That said, you know, there's a lot of refugee Democrats who care about civil liberties and who are against endless wars and who believe in traditional family values. People my age, and that's most, and older, and that's most of the people in that room, remember a time when there were very conservative Democrats, okay? They can come vote for us now, okay? We're trying to grow the party, all right? I haven't always been a Republican. Most of my life, I voted Democrat. But then they betrayed me. And my principles no longer aligned with theirs. So I went where my principles were reflected. And also, I changed. We have to allow people to change. We can't do this. Okay? We don't have to betray our principles, but it's more important that we talk in terms of principles and in terms of actions rather than in terms of labels. Because as anyone who knows history can tell you, what a Democrat now means is different than what it meant 10 years ago, is different from what it meant 50 years ago, is different from what it meant however long ago. All right, and Republican too. So I don't love that question.
You clarify. How did you, both of you, how do you feel we did last year in the campaign from the election?
Last year there were some good things that happened. But the trajectory that I was talking about earlier, we can't lull ourselves into false security thinking we're doing great. And that's what I'm talking about when I say, yeah, we're winning elections, but we're not winning enough elections, and we're not putting enough people on all the ballots. It needs to be more, or else we're going to wake up and we're not going to like the results.
Unless we're winning all elections, every election, there's always things we can do to improve. Whether it's recruiting new candidates, whether it's being more targeted with our campaign efforts. It's important that when we have any losses, even if it's just one, that we do a real deep dive, root cause analysis, and look at what happened and what can we do better. And changing things as needed to be changed. If you keep losing and you keep things the same, then you probably can continue to expect the same results.
If you keep losing and you keep things the same, you can probably expect the same results. So are we changing from we won and we're going to keep doing what we've been doing? It's not a mistake that these answers are both consistent and incoherent. There's no there.
Hello, my name is Neely Walters. Okay, so I know that nationally we've had a major issue with election integrity. Has it? It makes my mind explode, and and Jules, don't even. But I haven't seen it be as big an issue here, but it's always an issue in my mind. And I know, having done some poll observing, that there were some things that stood out. I know that prior years, some people on the integrity committee have filed complaints, and we don't know where those things are going. I want to know, what are we going to do to button it up?
That is on the forefront of everybody's mind. If it's not, then you have to pay attention. The Democrats are going to exploit any weakness they see. If we're not watching if we don't have an election judge everywhere we can have one, if we don't have a poll observer at every poll, if we're not able to be everywhere we need to be, to keep an eye on things, you can almost guarantee the Democrats are going to do something to exploit that.
Right.
And so it just comes down to a matter of making sure we recruit enough people, continue to grow the party, let people know that if they're not comfortable door knocking or phone banking, that there's a whole other effort. And quite frankly, that should be the first thing we're asking people when they come into the door, is if we don't have enough people on the election integrity side, that's the first question. Are you willing to be an election judge? Are you willing to be a poll watcher? And make sure that aspect is first and foremost taken care of before we get to anything else.
We can't be caught flat-footed and be naive enough to think that everything's good, right? And the thing is, it's complex design by design. It's almost like an IRS tax law, kind of thing, right? It's complex by design, and we have to have really sharp people really understanding it. People, I think Bruce already left earlier. Bruce is a person who really understands these things. We have to talk about some of these elected officials, and I agree, like obviously the poll watchers and stuff, we can't have a poll that's not watched, right? That's just the foundation of it. On top of things, even having committees, things like legal teams ready.
Do you agree, and for your slate whom you know, that if you do not win by our votes, that you will hit the ground running the minute that it's decided with, hold on, your time, talent, and money?
Yeah.
You commit.
So the answer to both y'all's questions, yes.
It is that simple. Yes, absolutely. We have to pull together. The talent of my slate, committed. We feel called upon to do this, but if we are not the ones who win, tell us how to work. We have the talent.
That's episode 6, guys. Wow, that was another marathon, but well worth it. I let the last few clips run there just because I feel like the differences between the two slates and the two candidates were so clear and so consistent that I didn't need to belabor it all the way through. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please share this episode. I'm going to do my best to break this one up into some smaller chunks to try and get more eyeballs on the episode that way. When you see those come out, share the shorter ones around because, here's the deal. All the usual suspects were there on Thursday night, but this convention is not going to be decided by all the usual suspects. It's going to be decided by people outside that room, and we need to make sure that people outside that room see this debate. Now, many of you may feel like I misrepresented things, and fine. I'm going to just take all the footage that I got from the town hall, and I'm going to put it, smash it together without any edits or anything, into a YouTube video, and I'll put that link in the description. Okay, I'm going to give you guys the full thing, so you know, in case you think there's stuff I left out that I shouldn't have left out or whatever. You can just look at the raw feed, and I encourage everyone to look at the raw feed and make their own decisions. And if you have questions or comments, or if I mentioned you and you want to come on the show and defend yourself, I'm all for that. I won't accuse you of throwing rocks. And if I find it disruptive, well, maybe my show needs to be disrupted. Who says disruption is necessarily bad? I want more people to be invited into this. And I want more people than just the people who were in the room in the town hall to determine the future of this party. So please spread this around. Now, I've had a message from Patricia Collick asking about the Jimmy Tate article in the Federalist Press. Now, the Jimmy Tate article, that's two-parter, is now behind a paywall, and that's for legal reasons. FTP, it needs to protect itself from frivolous lawsuits because it's a small organization and it could be damaged by a lawsuit. So it needs to do that so it can continue bringing you liberty-focused and conservative grassroots action-focused news stories. And also, frankly, it needs your support, and it's only $1.99 a month to subscribe to the Federalist Press, and you will be doing a great favor to, I think, a news organization that's going to be very important for the future of North Carolina. So go ahead and get that subscription. You'll get great quality content that you won't get anywhere else. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time with Beth Butler. Speaking of the Jimmy Tate story. Good night. Oh man, I almost forgot. We're going to wrap up with your action items, and remember, the time for action is now.